So today we're going to take a look at how we can cut out a subject and look to modify a photo into a more customized visual design. In Photopea, it is difficult to select out the subject using the quick selection or using the object selection. So unfortunately, you're going to have to be limited to using the polygonal lasso tool. With the polygonal lasso tool, you're going to take your time to draw around the outside of the object, clicking point by point to get as precise as possible. I can zoom in as much as possible, and I can then begin clicking point by point, drawing around the outside of the subject. As I go around, I want to be as accurate as possible, but remember, you can eventually do a duplicate of the original image and create a raster mask or separation so that you can make edits and changes. I'm using small anchor points around curves just to be as precise as possible. The smaller the anchor point, the better represented a curve will be within the design. If you need to fix a mistake, undo a line, you can always hit backspace or delete. That will help you step back, and then you can redo the line again. As I move up the leg, I realize that there is an open gap in between her arm and leg. So what I can do as a designer, go through the foot where it meets with the arm and come back around later on. So I'm just going to cut through, and then I can follow through the inside of the shape. Make sure not to click too quickly, or else it might connect back to the original point, and then you may have to redo, or you'll have to add in an additional element, which is holding down shift to add in a second section. So again, as I'm get to the hand and foot, I'm just going to go through the area. As I get up to the hair, the more complicated area, I'm going to look to just get the overall outline of the sections. We'll see as we go through the design. I don't need to necessarily be exact with this area. I can kind of design around the more complicated issue. And then as I complete the hair, I'm just going to continue down the rest of the body to get eventually back to our starting point. To close it up, I can double click if I don't see the opening spot. But now that I've selected around the subject, I'm going to actually create a duplicate of the background layer. Duplicate layer, right click over on the background. And with the background copy, I'm going to go down to the Raster Mask. Click on the Raster Mask. And this actually separates the subject from the overall background. This way I can paint in any areas that I might have messed up on or eliminate out areas that I did not get erased originally. So that's just hiding out the background. But now I'm going to look to stylize this. I'm going to create a new layer for a square shape. I'm going to slide this below the background copy. With the rectangle select, I'm going to draw a rectangle. I can adjust the location, slide it down a little bit. I kind of want to avoid the hair area for the most part. But now that I've drawn out a square shape, I'm going to look to fill this in. You go to Edit, Fill, choose out some bold dynamic color. Click OK. It fills in that area. Deselect. You see how it places behind the subject. There is one area that I need to clean up on the subject here. We see that the hair is blocking out this area. So I need to go back to the Raster Mask. Use the eraser tool and erase out the area. Make sure your fill color is set to white, or your foreground color is set to white, and your background color is set to black. And then you can paint in the more dynamic color variant of the square. Shrink down the brush using the left bracket or right bracket. I'm not painting in pink. I'm just revealing it underneath of the hair elements. I can zoom out. And I don't necessarily want this to be so bold, so I'm going to look to drop the opacity down on the square layer. And we can make it a little bit more dynamic by adding in some text. So I'm going to click on the capital T icon over on the left side navigation, the type tool. Click and drag to create a text box. I'm going to type in dancer. I can highlight the text, change the black to white text at the top navigation. And I'm going to up the size of the text. Right now it's at 300, but I'm going to look to change the font. I can highlight over the text again, click on the drop down, and I'm going to look for a script font, something that's a little bit more elegant overall. So if I were just testing out, maybe Dynolite, or you can just see the different previews that are shown over on the right side. So maybe I'll go with dancing script. And for the dancing script, I'm going to place this on top of my subject. I'm going to make this more bold, make it stand out. And I can look to modify the text, edit, free transform. I can rotate a little bit, make it match more to the overall direction that the dancer is going in. And I can actually get more creative by intertwining the text around the subject. So by intertwining the text around the subject, I can add a raster mask onto the text layer, and then use the eraser to erase out areas of the letters that I want to make appear behind or in front of the subject. So with the eraser tool, I can make it appear as if the text wraps behind her foot. And again, I can always go paint back in areas using the paintbrush tool. And I can choose every other portion of the letters. So again, going back to the eraser. Take your time, zoom in, get close. That way you can get as accurate as possible. You can test out different variations, see what works for you. If I want to go back, look to wrap the text a little bit differently, I can again modify the direction. Maybe it goes along the legs of the subject. Again, adding in that layer raster mask, erasing out sections that I don't want. So I'm going to do once I have the dancer text, I'm going to look to modify this image overall a little bit more. I'm going to actually leave the dancer text where it is, but I actually want to rotate and create a little bit more interest on the overall image itself. So I'm going to look to rotate this canvas. I click on the crop tool. With the crop tool, I'm going to draw a box around the entire subject. And I'm going to move my cursor to the outside and look to rotate the picture. Now I need to crop down the areas of text that I do not, or the areas that are now transparent. I'm going to change the capital D to a lowercase d. Gives a little bit more cohesiveness with the text. And I'm going to rotate the text to fit now better to my overall subject. Edit, free transform. So I can match better to the curve of the dancer. I can hit enter. And now I'm going to add a raster mask onto the subject. Use the eraser tool to erase out areas of the letters that I want to intertwine around the subject's body. And I can use the eraser tool to erase out sections. Make sure that your fill color is on white, your background color is on black. I can paint in areas if I accidentally went too much, erased too much. can use the paintbrush to clean up any edges. So to modify this even more, I'm going to create a duplicate of the dancer text. Duplicate layer over in the layers panel. I'm going to hide the original. And with the new layer, I'm going to rasterize this text. I can right click over in the area, rasterize. That rasterized the text. Now I can look to add in some shadows to make the text appear as if it's wrapping behind the leg of the subject. So I'm going to use the burn tool, and I'm going to change the range of the burn tool. Burn tool is located right above the capital T icon. And I'm going to change the range from midtones to highlights. And with the burn tool, we're looking to just burn in some edges to make it appear as if it's a shadowed area. So if I look at where the foot meets the D, as I click and drag over the area, you kind of see that I can create a shadow. But I want to soften up my eraser or my burn tool by dropping down the hardness. I go a little bit bigger with the size as well. But it helps to create a shadowed effect underneath of the design, making it look like the text is wrapping behind the leg. This also gives the opportunity to kind of see little areas that you may need to clean up a little bit. Make sure that you're selected on the Raster Mask to paint in those areas again. Make sure when you do burn, we're burning on the actual layer, not the raster mask. And if I want to rotate this square back to being parallel with the ground, or I can look to scale it up, play with the sizing, it's up to you. Just select out the square shape. But to give a little bit more of emphasis, I can actually select the background layer, and I'm going to turn this to a desaturated variation. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, down to Desaturate, and now I leave her in color while turning the background to black and white, giving a little bit more of an impact. Finally, I'm going to look to add a shadow behind the text. I'm going to select the dancer copy actual layer. Make sure we're not on the raster mask. I'm going to go down to Effects, Drop Shadow. With the drop shadow, I want to slightly adjust. I can change the angle. I want it to kind of sit down to the right from the subject. I'm going to move the distance in closer to the subject. And the size I can adjust if I want it a little bit tighter. This way the text stands out a little bit stronger when it gets over to the lighter background. Then I can click OK. And we've now modified and created a pretty interesting and unique design.